Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. Lately I've been kind of mentioning dates because these are becoming almost the day I do this. So it's October 22nd, 9 days away from Halloween. It's not a favorite holiday, but it is a favorite holiday in that it's the kickoff of the holiday season, as I always see it. So. Um, I've been talking for the last couple of weeks on and off with SARA OTTO, who is the chief supply chain officer for Nest, and we're going to talk all about that. Uh, uh, and I need to the mission of Nest, because I never knew it existed, is connecting people, artistry and impact of craft to create a more prosperous and beautiful world. And what Ness does, what Sarah does, the whole team does, it just blew me away because I never knew it existed. And they've connected 3,000 businesses all over the world with people who do amazing things. It's a brave new world. I from time to time I quote Aldous Huxley. It is a brave new world, and the work that Sarah is doing at Nest. I'm so glad we all got connected with this because I'm enthralled with what you're doing and the things that I've been learning about. So, and actually, I have to turn on for my birthday, I got a little on-air button. So now we're really officially on air. So this is a very, very special time that I'm going to spend with Sarah, Chief Supply Chain Officer. And by the way, I bet half the people out there don't even know what supply chain is, and I hear it all the time. So there's a lot of things we're going to accomplish now, and I'm really grateful for your time. Uh, and welcome back to Buffalo. I know you're visiting Buffalo. Um,
Yeah.
so. Enough with the monologue. It's done. Why don't you do a little intro, Sarah, and then we got a lot of things to talk about. Take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you, Kelvin, for having me. I'm Sarah Otto, the Chief Supply Chain Officer at Nest. And basically, what I do at Nest, which is a not-for-profit organization, is work within the supply chains of brands and other partners who are sourcing products. But specifically, what we look at are deep down into those supply chains. And again, to maybe give that definition of a supply chain is are all the people kind of involved in making a product, and that starts often at the raw material, which could be your cotton or fabrics, textiles, all the way up through making garments and other products, and then finally through a brand and at a store or online where you buy those products. So what Nest specifically does associated with those supply chains is looking at that deeper level where there's people working outside of factories or traditional facilities along that supply chain. So I know we'll talk more about that in detail, but I oversee a team that really supports the development of businesses or the workers that are working within those supply chains to make sure they're covered and are protected just like any other worker would within the supply chain.
Okay. By the way, I love by the ways. By the way, you didn't start out, and that's my next question. How did you get into supply chain? But your background, having gone to the State University of New York at Buffalo, that's why you're back for homecoming. Um, you did some really interesting stuff. You did stuff in the Peace Corps. I'm a Kennedy guy, and had I been so disposed, I would have joined the Peace Corps because that was right up my alley back in those days, coming out in the '60s, early '60s. But you did some stuff in Togo, and then what a background! And then you actually did stuff in the record business.
Yes. Yes. I worked for an independent musician named Ani DeFranco, whose hometown is Buffalo as well. So supported her and basically her own record label and kind of small entrepreneurial business. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So all of that, and I have an interest in music because when I started my journalism 15 years ago, not knowing anything about journalism, 15, 20 minutes from Asbury Park, the
Oh,
birthplace of Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
who happens to live 2 miles down the road from me. Uh, he lives in a big house. I live in a small house, but whatever. So the music thing also, resonated with me. So with that kind of background, how did you get involved in supply chain work?
Yeah, I would say well, I went to school for business, so that is my background. And I specifically studied arts management. I wanted to take a business degree, but put it into, either in a small business or really looking at entrepreneurship. And so my Peace Corps experience, I was a small enterprise development volunteer. So I was partnered with local small enterprises, supporting them, and the main project I was paired with was with an artisan. And so she was making and producing her own products, selling them either to locals who were there visiting or in the Peace Corps, or just going through TOGO, and then also trying to sell them internationally. And so she was selling products to Nest, which was at a very fledgling size at that time. It was about 3 years old. And so through that partnership and that relationship, I connected with our executive director, Rebecca Van Bergen, and then we've been friends and colleagues ever since. And so that was my first time kind of seeing beyond the US, where I buy all the products, seeing how they were made. And that was just really fascinating for me.
Okay. Um, Along the way, there's an aha moment that led to building Nest's compliance program. You have to kind of explain, what a compliance program is. I can guess at it. Um, was there a specific experience or problem that kind of lit the fire to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nest, when it was founded in 2006, the two things that still remain to this day are that we were going to work with women primarily, and also with artisans, and seeing how craft and being an artisan can also be your income and your economic situation. And so Rebecca, our founder, really liked that intersection. And so we started off looking to support those businesses and help them develop. Along the way, very organically, a lot of brands also wanted to come to us and say, hey, we know you work with artisans. We're really interested in sourcing artisan products for our collections. Can you connect us? And so that kind of started happening, and it was pretty casual in the beginning. But after some time, those same businesses started wanting to know more about where they were sourcing from, who was making the products, how are they paid, how are they treated. The products are beautiful, but they didn't really know where people were that were making them, or what that even looked like. And so the biggest aha moment was we were actually approached by Williams Sonoma Inc. That's a
Oh,
home goods store and chain. They
wow.
had made a very public commitment to source a large amount from artisan businesses at that time. And so they also knew Nest was working with artisans. And once you commit to buy product, you also need to have that due diligence for who's making it, how are they paid, are there children making it, are they safe? All of these questions, as any business would need to have. And so they approached Nest to say, could you help support us in developing a program to do that? And at the time, when we say social compliance, if you think about a factory, there are annual audits that happen in a factory looking at all of these same issues. But to take something in a factory and bring it into the type of supply chain we work in, which is often people working from home, a large network of individuals working from homes, or very informal workshops, it doesn't really apply apples for apples. And so even though the brands were trying to kind of take what was already established, for many decades in the factory, it wasn't really working at that level. So because of Nest's expertise and experience working within these supply chains and really developing trust and relationships, I think we were just perfectly suited to be able to kind of develop this program and be able to make it meet the needs of the brands from their, either regulatory or legal requirements, but as well to be able to support the artisan businesses in practically doing what they needed to do to sell those products.
Okay. I heard you say the word social compliance. It's a powerful word, and,
Hmm.
it matters a lot in what you do, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. I heard you say that.
Yeah, and the social compliance is basically the understanding on the social, meaning the people who are within that supply chain. So environmental is kind of another aspect of compliance and looking at sustainability, but social compliance is really our key area where we're looking at how people are being treated and making sure that they are protected in their rights as well.
Okay. Um, I'm pulling out. I pulled out this thing called informal economy, which becomes like it's invisible for a lot of companies. Can you talk about informal economy and how that pertains to what you're doing with Nest? Um,
Yeah, absolutely. The informal economy, as opposed to the formal economy, are people who are working, who often may be working on a temporary, seasonal, part-time, or in many of our cases, a piece, what we call a piece rate basis, meaning if I make baskets, for example, I work from my home and I'm told, can you make 10 baskets? And here's the design, here's the colors. And then I will be paid for those 10 pieces. Or if I only make 7 pieces, I will get paid for those 7 pieces. And so it's work that's not done on a contract, it's not a salaried position. It's usually not very regular or can be irregular. It goes by seasons sometimes if there's trends in the market. If you make something like a woven hat, for example, that's usually worn in summer and not in winter. And so you might only get orders for part of the year. And so those informal workers within the economy are also often doing other jobs. Farming is a big one. So they're doing farming or subsistence farming and they're getting, food coming into their households, but at the same time making other income through art or craft.
okay. I'm thinking about um, the people who the crafts the people who do the crafting. What does their world actually look like? They're all over the world. They're in Africa, India. I think you spent 4 years in India. What is their world? I'm always thinking, because I know there's so many abuses in the world that this wonderful crafts person, the crafts woman, who's making this incredible basket, this work of art, and she sells it. In the old days, before what you did,
Mm-hmm.
she may have spent tremendous amounts of time on that, and it goes in whatever that supply chain was, antiquated as it might have been. But what I'm just saying, in the old days, I don't think much ever got back to her, did it?
Yeah. Yeah. And without having any oversight of that or the word we like to use a lot in this is transparency. So there's been a lack of transparency. And so, I mean, what does it look like at that level? I mean, one statistic that is estimated, but it's quite an interesting one, is that within the apparel sector alone, 20 to 60% of production is through the informal economy. So whether that's
Wow.
home formal workshop. So
Wow.
it's a potentially huge number, billions of workers around the world. And so it does look like, in apparel, for example, it could be, you have a garment that the fabric is cut and sewn within the factory. So all of that is under formal economy, but they might have an embroidery on that same garment, which may go outside of the factory. Someone at their home works on that, and then it's sent back to the factory for quality control or finishing and packaging, all of that to get sold to a brand. So there's and it goes beyond apparel. We also work heavily in the home goods sector, but this also extends into many different industries. It could be food, within farming, waste collectors. You have people picking up plastic bottles from landfills and from the streets that then are feeding into a more formal supply chain. But it's really a huge number of people across the world that are doing this and are often invisible because, as I was saying earlier, the audit systems that we have in place for factories at this point are pretty well, they're sophisticated. They're pretty well enforced, and they're happening annually. But they go up to a certain level, and beyond that, they either haven't been required, or they're still kind of murky in terms of what people need to do about it. Or before our program existed, there wasn't really a formal way of doing that and looking into that supply chain. So those workers, to your point, have been exploited. They've been kind of overlooked. We often see within the apparel and home goods sector something called an industry rate when they're paying workers. So it's that, over the last 20, 30 years, a basket has been made in this area and everyone's just paying the same amount, the different businesses making that product. And that amount hasn't been determined against the minimum wage. They're not under contract. The laws in those countries don't explicitly say that home workers are included to make a minimum wage there. So it's a very complicated system. And just, I think, until very recently with, the regulations that you might be familiar have come down in Europe and hopefully are going to resonate in the US at some point, but that they are requiring that brands are going deeper down into their supply chains and must be able to not only see who's there, but to be able to prove that these initiatives around social compliance are in fact happening.
Okay. Sarah, how do you find and approach these workers? I mean, that must be a huge,
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
Yeah. It is sometimes a long drive to get to where they are, but the way we find them is, I would say, primarily through either a brand who comes to us saying we want to do this program, and then they connect us to their suppliers or their vendors, and then that vendor will work with them to map out their supply chain, which just really means that we're going in and looking at all of those different layers. We're seeing at which layer there may be home workers or informal workers, counting them, putting names to those workers, their locations. So that all happens like very soon in the program, and that can happen with a brand, or even sometimes we have vendors coming directly to us who want to do this program as well. And so our program is very very reliant on that relationship with those vendors. The vendors themselves could be a factory who then is kind of subcontracting or outsourcing products or components of their production. Or in some other cases, we have a large network of businesses that are just really true community artisan businesses, and then they have relationships with their artisans. Sometimes that's traditional heritage crafts. But in any case, that kind of central entity is what is kind of where we start and we get the information from. And that's where building the trust is really important, because traditionally those workers have been kind of protected in a way, or kind of, not to say they've been kept hidden, but they, again, haven't been the center of these social compliance measures. So going into their house, into their personal homes, it's a big deal. It's a big thing to
Big
ask.
deal.
And
Yeah.
so it does require us to spend quite some time, getting to know that business. Our team travels a bit. My whole team has lived abroad in several places and just has really learned how to navigate the cultural side of this as well, and the sensitivities to the fact that we're going to talk to people who are in homes, and I think also don't share the mentality that someone in a factory would have to say, well, I work for this company and I understand someone's going to ask me a bunch of questions. They just kind of work for themselves from home. And so someone coming from the outside can be intimidating and scary. But I think as well, we've also seen them get very excited that someone's appreciating their work or asking them questions and having an eye on what, how they're treated and protected.
I'm listening to you. A key word. I wrote it down. I don't know, you see me. I'm taking notes, by the way. I don't know if you noticed. I've been writing stuff down. I may be one of the only. I know Johnny Carson never took notes when he interviewed some. Do you know Johnny Carson? Half the people I talk to, I said Johnny Carson. Who you talk? Who? And I slap myself because I'm aging. But that word trust is such a powerful
Mhm.
word in what you're doing, and I think as Nest, it becomes so much more part of our world. built into that is trust. A
Hmm.
powerful, wonderful word. Um, Completely off topic, and as I'm listening to you and digesting, it's off topic, but it pertains. It's not really off topic. In this crazy world that we live in, with the institution of crazy tariffs, does that come down in any way to affect some of the work you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I would say it isn't directly affecting Nest because we don't buy or sell products, but of course we work with many brands who are obviously impacted by that. And then by relation to that, the suppliers and the vendors that we work with are also impacted, which means that trickles down to the worker level. And so we have brands who are really kind of scrambling and struggling to figure out how to navigate that, who takes the cost. Obviously, that's a huge thing. Another thing that we've seen quite a bit this year are suppliers, and then I think with the brands having conversations about where the countries of production are and shifting those. So we have businesses that are leaving one country and moving completely to another country, which in some cases with craft, you craft is so connected in some cases to the culture and the communities that make things. So sometimes that's not possible, but that means that the products made by those artisans are going to be significantly impacted. And so someone needs to figure out who is going to take on that burden. In other cases, it means a business might have to, going back to like learning about culture, like move to a new country and really navigate setting up a new supply chain and a new
Um,
culture, finding new workers and artisans. And so that's also extremely difficult to do. And so we've seen a lot of impact on all
yeah,
sides for that as well.
right. As I'm listening, I'm thinking, I don't read newspapers. I read online newspapers and tariff and I know I had to ask that. Before we move on, I always like to drift. I forewarned you. Um, I always like to drift to the aura of Barbara Walters, one of my favorite people. So here goes, and you don't even have to answer it. It is what it is, and it's cute and whatever. And it could be a couple answers. So, Sarah, excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's a few, but I think the one, if I've ever thought about this before, is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Probably, I think what she's done. I know, I miss her, but what she's done in the world, and but I think the reason I respect her so much is the way that she's done it, and she's navigated different people with different personalities on political sides, and always with dignity. And I think that's been incredible to see as a woman, especially, and as someone who's also trying to, in some ways, change the systems. And I think she took the yeah, that opportunity to work in, the Supreme Court and just working around the law has been very interesting. And I think that applies really well here too, because we're looking to also influence policy and law and the way that people kind of see those requirements to impact people, right? To ultimately impact people. And so that's what I would
What a
say.
great answer. By the
Yeah.
way, this is the second time I said that. By the way, I'm a huge fan of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And most people don't know that what launched her entire career was the fact that as a woman, she couldn't get, she graduated number one at Columbia Law, was number one at Harvard Law. And nobody, and of course, her husband, Marty, moved down, he's a tax lawyer, and he moved down to New York. He was a great tax lawyer. And they moved, she wanted to be a lawyer. She wanted to take cases. Nobody would hire her for minority reasons, a woman.
Yeah.
The only person, not person, the only entity that hired her was Rutgers University. And she
Yeah. Yeah.
became, that's right. And she spent, I think, 9 years at Rutgers University. and it was while she was at Rutgers. When you're a professor, you can take private cases,
Yeah.
and that's that case in the Tenth Circuit Court, with a caregiver. By the way, the reason yes, it's so synchronistic that you said Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because you know what I was watching last night at midnight on the
What?
basis of sex.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Perfect.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. I own it. At midnight, out of the random universe, I decided I want to watch Ruth again,
Nice.
and I watched on the basis of sex. I love, love, love the last basic scene, the courtroom scene, when she arises and gets inspired, and then gets the Tenth Circuit Court to overrule,
Yeah.
and that launched her whole career.
Yeah.
Just and
Incredible.
I also when I was watching this guy speak for I didn't watch him. He's speaking uh, a senator or a congressman. He's talking for like 19 hours now about all the things going on, and I'm saying with everything going on. I'm so glad she's not here to see all this stuff because it would have really upset her. But that was a great answer. Uh,
Thanks.
so, one other quickie. Do you have any like favorite movies besides On the Basis of Sex?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, let's say I would say Shawshank Redemption might be high on that list. If I can think off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that too.
Yeah.
Love, love, love that too. It's funny. Bob Gunton, who played the warden. Uh,
Hmm.
and it's funny, he plays these nasty people. He also played the dean at the medical school where Patch Adams, Robin Williams. Uh,
Yeah.
but Bob Gunton is here in New Jersey this weekend. He's at some thing, and I so wanted to go because his performance in Shawshank Redemption to me was riveting. He was just
Yeah.
such an evil man,
Yeah.
and he's there, and I'm teetering on whether to go or not. Anyway, moving on. Moving on. Is there a surprising thing that you learned from while you're building this program?
Um, I I would say that maybe the thing that did surprise me most, and it kind of reflects on what we were talking about earlier, is that how much there was a lack of transparency in these supply chains. And um, I think when I first came into the program, and Ness was developing this, and we started working with the brands, the brands were like, we don't know who we're sourcing from. And that, I think that's still shocking to me today that it is happening. And I think the brands want to do something. And I do think this is where Nest being a third party has been really helpful for them. Obviously, within a brand, there's so much going on, and um, they are trying to manage their relationships with who they're sourcing from and do that in responsible ways. But just the fact that you could buy something and really not know where it had come from, was shocking to me. And so I think it's something that I pride our team in doing really well, and being able to kind of work with these suppliers and get that information, and really and then to support the brands and knowing that as well. I think that really is an important thing to do.
Okay. You sort of covered some of this just to kind of there's a lot of risks in supply chains, including the child labor, forced labor, underpayment and stuff. Um, so what kind of risks does your program really address, and how do you
Yeah,
police it?
yeah, we cover the kind of topic areas that we cover are business rights and transparency. So that's the first one, which is really, does this business have formalized policies that apply down to this level of the supply chain? And not only do they have them, but are workers informed and educated about those policies, meaning, protections that are in place for them? Do they have records that are clear, and um, Are they having that transparency? The second one is around fair compensation and benefits. So again, how people are paid, how often they're paid, are they paid enough? Are they meeting minimum wages? Are they kind of clear on what they're going to be paid, et cetera? The third one is around we call it advocacy and protection, but really looking at, this is, I think, a very interesting one for our work, that looking at children, are they involved in the production, or, are there ways that we could help kind of create that line of like what is appropriate, what's not? And where to kind of dive into that one just for a second is that when it comes to traditional craft, as opposed to factory production, kids are learning from their parents often, and that's been a tradition passed down for generations, hundreds of years in some cases. And so to come into a community and say, you can no longer teach your kids how to do this thing that your family has been doing for generations, it's not really what we want to do. But we do want to also protect the children from paid work and production. So there's a lot of conversations around really defining what is education versus what is production and work. So that's the child labor piece is very heavy on that. And then health and safety, are people protected? Are they exposed to, hazards? And there's a lot of chemicals that are used in the dyeing processes, or, if you're cutting materials, things like that. And then the last area that we look at is around environmental care, which we don't go into extremely deep, but really around disposal of materials, especially around wastewater, chemicals, because people are working from homes. It often will be that they will dispose of things into the ground around their house, or to a local water stream, and we just know that has impact on the community, on health and the environment. So when we look at that, especially.
In my reading, because I do my due diligence as a journalist, I did see the term on. By the way, I should tell folks out there, and of course, I'll buildanest.org,
Yep.
and I'll repeat it enough times when I write up my thing, buildanest.org. But as I'm perusing and I did see the word climate resilience
Mm-hmm.
come up on the website, and being somebody who went to the first Earth Day on April 22nd, 1970, that means a lot to me.
Yeah.
So moving on as we kind of wind down, a big part of your work is serving as a bridge between suppliers and brands. So what kind of things do you teach brands to help them create impact in the supply chain, if I get this right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we do have this program we're doing directly with the vendors, and having them establish policies, and then from there creating systems, and then making sure those systems reach down to the worker level. So that's happening all the time. And then with the brands, we really like to, keep the transparency there as well. And so having the brands be part of our conversations with the suppliers, to have them read the reports that we create, to have them stay up to date on any progress that's being made to create those policies and systems. And so so I think on one hand, we certainly help them kind of see the details and information about their own supply chains, where people are, who they are, how they're being impacted. And then on the other hand, we do support brands in creating their own internal policies. So unfortunately, for many years, the idea of homework was a kind of a dirty word in the industry. People were, understandably kind of nervous about it. It didn't have a way, when you worked with home workers, to have monitoring and social compliance practices. So brands would say to their suppliers, you can't use home-based work or informal workers. Now that we have programs like this, brands can then change their policies and be more open and accepting of that, which not only gives people more opportunities for work, but it gives the brands, more I think more diverse, fun or kind of sources of products. They can source from traditional artisans. They can source from women working at home taking care of their kids versus just factory production. So we do a lot of work kind of aside from the supply chain itself, but with brands looking at their own policies and then internally, how do their systems kind of accommodate the fact that they're going to source from artisans? And that's from a social compliance standpoint, but it's also even from a sourcing standpoint, when you order a handmade basket, it's not going to be done 100% perfectly as if it was done in a factory, or a quilt might look slightly imperfect or take longer because it's made by hand. And so educating brands on like what does it mean to work with artisan businesses and what are the expectations of that so
More
that they can
flexibility.
get along.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, and so it's kind of a two-way education on all of those things as well.
Has a brand ever, by the way, no, I look at big retailers and do some big retailers partake? I mean, you mentioned Williams Sonoma, so some big retail, and to me, that's such a wonderful point. If
Yes.
I'm a retailer to have some special product here, and you're doing a service, as we said, as I read, on the mission statement, to make it a more beautiful and prosperous world.
Yeah.
Well, no. Uh, but anyway, has a brand ever changed its approach after seeing a supply chain differently? Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that happens all the time. And one really cool example I can think of, and it was a major retailer, when we started looking at the supply chains when it came to wages, that was a big concern for them. And um, I would say like at least 85% of the businesses when we start in their supply chains and look at their current wages are usually under minimum wage, to the local country's minimum wage. And so we kind of brought this information to their attention and they were very concerned about it. And then what they did internally is they set a date where they were going to meet those minimum wages. They would work with those suppliers to make sure that they could do it together, and that from that moment on, the workers should always be paid the minimum wage. And so um, they asked us to do a study around the wages. We talked to all of their active suppliers that they had. We got information about the wages that they were paying. We calculated how far from minimum wage were they, not only by percentage but in dollars and cents, and brought that to the brand. And I think what was so amazing about that is the brand knew there was a problem, but before we did this research they didn't know to what extent that problem was. And so how can you make an educated decision or make changes without really knowing what you're going to do, and how, of course, on their end, how that will impact their final cost or cost along that supply chain. And so once we gathered all the information, we gave that to them, and then they were able to set up this kind of new policy and new system. They were having much more, I think, open conversations with their suppliers. The suppliers felt more comfortable to say, hey, I need to increase my price because this, minimum wage has gone up and I need to guarantee the workers are paid at least minimum wage. So I really found that to be quite a fascinating, change that they took in the supply chain.
Again, I didn't know about Nest, and I always define myself as being mid-American, regular guy, Jersey guy. But one of the things when my two grandkids, and I did mention this to you when we spoke last week. When the two grandkids were born, especially my wife, not me, she reached out and found a company in South America that had handcrafted little stuffed animals. I forgot the name. I told it to you. And that's all we bought, like five or six for each grandkid, because and there was a little tag, attached to the stuffed animal with a specifically unique name for the
Mhm.
stuffed animal. But what I'm saying is, I'm just a regular guy, in every shape, way, or form. But I was in my own way conscious to support. a
Yeah.
venture of course, I knew nothing about the supply chain and the social compliance, and I knew nothing about all of that. But we just thought we were doing, a good deed, and you know what? It was pricey stuff. It wasn't. It wasn't, Walmart stuff. It was pricey, but we felt to give the grandchildren something that was handcrafted. And that's important, to something handcrafted and
Yeah.
supporting that. Of course, I didn't know the term really supply chain, but supporting the supply chain.
Yeah,
So,
the community.
and I
Yeah.
bet there are armies of people, Sarah, that would like to do the same if they, and I mean, armies of people who would do that. Just a
Yeah.
thought. Um,
Yeah. On that point, really quickly, is that with this compliance program we have, there is a certification, and along with that, there's what we will call a seal or a logo that a brand can put onto products. And so, when you go into the stores, you can pick up the product. Obviously, you can see where it's made, but it would have that logo on it, and that means that this has gone through the program. It's the worker who made it's meeting minimum wage. All these other protections are in place. So I do think that was a key kind of component of what we were trying to do, working with suppliers, working with the brands, but that third element of the consumer, like you, and I don't think you need to know what a supply chain is, but if you know that that equals, someone has been protected and is paid
I
well,
would love
that's
that.
what it is.
Love
Yeah,
that. And I again, and in an uneducated assessment, I
yeah,
have to think again because of my middle class, middle everything, what I felt, how important that was to contribute to that, and overlooking the cost, a couple of extra bucks, but it's worth it. It's great for the kids. They're beautiful stuffed animals, but it's also great to
yeah,
support them. Um,
absolutely.
so last question, where do you see the program heading? And what is your hope, like for the next 10 years? Uh,
Yeah. Ooh,
to me, the
it's a
sky's the
big
limit.
question. Yeah, yeah, the sky is the limit. I think a couple areas that I have been eager to dig into more. One is obviously the artisan world and the craft world is very closely tied to Nest and its mission and our history, so that will never change. But a few years back, we did start taking this program that I've been talking about and bringing it into different industries. And we started specifically with waste collection, and in that case, plastic bottles that were being collected, brought into a supply chain, and turned into what I now know is called a pellet of plastic, which a company can buy and then melt that down into whatever they need to use it for. So we then were working with a computer brand who was using that recycled plastic in their accessories and products. And so that was a very interesting learning. We kind of saw the difference between, I would say, the culture of artisan supply chains versus waste collector supply chains, the different risks that are kind of present for workers to be exposed to, whether that's health and safety or the way they get paid. And so I really see us kind of being able to take our expertise around informal supply chains and apply them to others, where when we started this program, we didn't really know there was a gap in the industry until WSI came to us, Williams Sonoma. And so without having kind of that knowledge in the beginning, we would have probably never started. But now we do see the industries around us and brands who come to us saying, hey, we have that same problem, maybe Nest could help us. And so I think one is that, like, expanding into kind of other industries, and wherever there may be a gap, we can help to fill that with what we do. And then I think the other one is definitely a longer term one, but one that I think is still very important, especially these days, is trying to influence more around policy at the government level. And like, I'll take India, for example. We have worked in India forever, since the beginning of Nest. It's a very rich, country with a lot of crafts, rich with crafts and artisans. And so I think being able to even speak to government. I know there's a lot of programs that are built around, supporting handloom or other types of crafts. And so how could we maybe build better protections into the local labor law itself, right? And right now, a lot of this work is dependent on the private sector brands coming in, requiring that. The EU now is having the requirements on their end, but how do we get that to become part of kind of everyday life and not something special that is kind of being added on or looked into? I would love, maybe that's a 50-year goal, but having more influence and activity around like how we can influence outside of the private sector as well.
Wow. No, it's a wow. And by the way, you said something about recycled plastics, and it's so again synchronistically. The other day, I watched. I forget where I don't. I know what I watched, but I don't remember in the context where I watched it. But there was a process. They took recycled tons of recycled plastics, put it in a machine that ground it up finely, and then there was a natural type of glue that could have been made in somebody's kitchen, and they throw the glue in there and they mix it all around, and you know what comes out? Blocks that you could use for building.
Oh, very, yeah.
Sidewalk, sidewalks, you can use
Yeah.
these blocks for it was wow. And that's what you just said, Sarah. Wow.
Yeah, that whole industry of like recycled or alternatives to plastic, even it blows my mind.
Blows my
uh,
mind. And I hope they do find stuff to do with it. I'm tired of reading that plastic is in my brain, it's in my cardiac tissue now. It's in breast milk. I'm not happy about that. So be it.
yeah.
Anyway, uh, this has been great, and I said this to you before we went on air. I'm sitting in this chair 12 hours a day, and part of my mission is to get ideas and concepts and things and people and places out there in a small way. I'm trying to grow this, and I'm volunteering to get some people together. From we can Zoom and talk and put a face to some of this and get it out there so people can see and feel. So anyway, I'm all yours. I'm open and I'm all yours, and I'm so grateful that you spent the time to do this.
Yeah, thank you, Kelvin. It's been wonderful to talk about it and hope to see you again and lots more to share in
Yeah,
in the future.
I'm
Yeah.
here. Truly, it's funny. If you got to believe that was an old baseball player, I think Tug McGraw from the Philadelphia Phillies. I think you got to believe. I think it was him. And you got to believe. And if you believe, then, that's 60, 70, 80%. And the rest
Yeah.
is just mechanical. So I believe. And again, thank you. And please do come back.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't leave. I'm just going to stop recording. We'll do a 2-minute wrap. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.